Every morning at dawn, my rooster belts out freedom louder than any alarm clock. I never thought someone could call that un-American until the HOA showed up, waving a noise complaint and talking about tone and timing. Asterisk, I never thought a rooster could stir up so much drama. His name's Liberty. Got him as a birthday gift from my brother, who said, "You live out in the semi-country now. You need a proper alarm clock." Liberty was just a chick then, but once he grew up, he found his voice, and boy, did he love to use it every morning, like clockwork. He'd hop up on the post by my front porch, right under the American flag I've had flying there since. I moved in and crow like he was leading a battlefield charge. It didn't bother me. In fact, it kind of inspired me. There's something about that sound at dawn that makes you feel like the day's worth conquering. I didn't realize he was bothering anyone until the first friendly reminder from the HOA. It was a generic flyer stuck in my mailbox, no names, no signatures, just be considerate of early morning noise. I laughed it off. I figured someone was just having a bad morning and needed to point a finger. Besides, I checked our HOA rules nothing about livestock. And out here, a lot of folks have chickens, goats, even a couple pigs. Still, just to be safe, I moved Liberty's coop a bit further back in the yard and built a small wooden barrier to muffle the sound. Didn't stop him. Come 5:45 a.m., he'd still be out there doing his patriotic duty. A few days later, I got another note, this time handwritten. Your rooster is waking up the entire block. This is a residential community, not a farmyard. We ask that you keep your animals quiet during early hours. Kept it. Something about the way quiet was underlined 3 times told me this wasn't just about noise. I could feel the pettiness brewing, and I had a pretty good idea who it was. Carol, the head of the HOA's landscaping committee. She'd complained about my flag before, claiming it was too large for front yard aesthetics. I didn't respond. No reason to throw fuel on a fire that might burn itself out. Instead, I went about my usual routine. Liberty crowed. I drank coffee, and life rolled on. But then came the morning Carol showed up in person. I was out front, watering my tomato plants, and Liberty had just finished his morning performance. She stormed up the driveway, sunglasses on, clipboard in hand. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "Think what's funny?" She pointed to Liberty, who was pecking around near the porch steps like nothing had happened. "That thing screams like a siren every morning. People have jobs, kids, sleep schedules." "He's a rooster," I said, trying to stay calm. "That's what they do. This isn't a barnyard. This is a planned community. There are noise ordinances. HOA guidelines don't say anything about roosters," I reminded her. I'd double-checked by now. Her lips tightened. "We're updating the rules." That's when I knew it was serious. Carol didn't just want Liberty quiet, she wanted him gone. I watched her march back to her Prius and scribble something on her clipboard, like she was personally drafting a new amendment to the Constitution. The next week, the HOA board sent me a formal letter. "We've received multiple complaints regarding excessive early morning noise originating from your property. This is your first official warning. Continued disturbances may result in fines." They even attached a decibel chart printed off Google. What really set me off, though, was the next line. "We understand the rooster may be symbolic, but overt displays of patriotism should not infringe on others' comfort." Wait, what? Overt displays of patriotism. It wasn't just the sound anymore. Now Liberty's theme was the issue. I had small American flags hanging on my porch. My front mailbox had a sticker that said, "Land of the Free." I even had one of those wooden yard signs with an eagle painted on it that said, "Don't tread on me." Apparently, all of that, combined with a vocal rooster, was too much. Still, I wasn't about to hide who I was or muzzle a rooster for doing what roosters do. The final straw came when I found Carol walking into my yard one morning with her phone up, filming Liberty. She didn't see me at first, nay, just stepped out with my coffee. She was talking to the camera. Clear violation of acceptable noise levels. Completely unreasonable for a residential community. Also note the oversized patriotic decor, which goes beyond suggested seasonal decoration guidelines. Cut her off. Carol, get off my property. She jumped like she'd been caught trespassing, which, let's be real, she had. I'm documenting for the board. You're documenting my chicken? She didn't say anything else, just marched out like she owned the street. That day, I started planning my response. I wasn't about to go toe-to-toe with policy wording or HOA red tape if Liberty's morning song was too patriotic. Then I'd show them what real patriotism looked like. The official notice arrived on a Monday, folded neatly in a white HOA envelope and hand-delivered into my mailbox. I already knew what it was before opening it. The day before, Liberty had decided to crow 4 times in a row his personal bestand. A few neighbors had clapped from their porches. Not a standing ovation, but enough to fire Carol up again. Inside the letter, printed in a new serif font like it meant business, were 3 bolded bullet points. Noise violations will be enforced starting June 1st at 6 a.m. themed auditory. Nuisances, yes, they called it that, are now subject to citation. Displays of excessive patriotism that disrupt neighborhood harmony will be reviewed by the board for further action. I read it twice, then again, making sure I wasn't hallucinating the wording. Excessive patriotism? How does one measure that? Was Liberty now some kind of national security risk? But the phrase that really stopped me cold was this: the HOA has moved to draft a community identity preservation policy, which will limit decorations, flags, and amplified sounds that promote personal ideologies over communal peace. They weren't even hiding it anymore. This wasn't about noise. This was about image. Someone, namely Carol, was offended by the way I represented myself, my flag, my rooster, my coffee mug that said 1776 or bust. I guess all of it was just too American for the board's taste. That same evening, I saw the first sign posted at the community bulletin board near the entrance gate. HOA vote this Thursday proposal. Amendments to Community Identity Preservation Policy Location. Clubhouse, lawn time, 6:30 p.m. Stood there reading it while Liberty rode shotgun in my old lawn cart. Completely unaware, he was now at the center of a suburban cultural war. A few other neighbors walked by, gave me a look, and then quickly turned away. I didn't blame them. Nobody wants to be seen picking a side till things really blow up. That Thursday, I went to the meeting. I wore my faded navy blue Don't Blame My voted for BBQ shirt and brought Liberty with me, in a small pet carrier lined with hay and an American flag towel. If they were going to vote on his fate, he deserved to be present. There were about 40 people in folding chairs, more than I'd expected. Most HOA meetings usually attracted maybe a dozen die-hard gardeners, and that one guy who always complains about mailbox height. But this time, the crowd was lively. I spotted Carol sitting up front next to the HOA president, Kyla, former accountant who acted like he was running for governor. When Kyle took the mic, he gave a 5-minute speech about community, character, and unifying soundscapes, whatever that meant. Then Carol stepped up, armed with her laminated charts. Some of our residents, she began, have expressed concerns about being overwhelmed by specific visual and auditory choices that dominate the shared space. She didn't name me, but she might as well have pointed right at Liberty and yelled him. Excessive flag placement, unregulated livestock noise, and overt political signage are changing the tone of our community, she said. This isn't about patriotism. About peace. Right? Peace. Peace at the cost of personality. I finally stood up. My rooster isn't political, I said. He's a rooster. He crows when the sun rises. That's nature. Then maybe nature belongs outside the gates, Carol shot back. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few people nodded. A few looked uncomfortable. Look, I said. I've followed every rule. I don't throw parties. I mow my lawn. I even trimmed my flag so it wouldn't touch the porch railing. But if you're saying a rooster crowing under a flag is some kind of threat, maybe the problem isn't me. I didn't mean to give a speech, but once the words were out, I couldn't take them back. They didn't vote that night, Kyle said. They'd take comments under advisement and reconvene next month for a final decision. In HOA speak, that meant they were stalling while they figured out how to cover their tracks. The next morning, I found a brand new flyer stuck to my door. Let's keep our mornings calm and our neighborhood beautiful, featuring a picture of a sunrise with absolutely no Schuster in it. The pettiness was official now. I started noticing subtle changes around the neighborhood. One neighbor quietly took down their flag bunting. Another removed the little eagle statue. From their front steps, people were getting scared not of the noise, but of being targeted next. It was a silent chill spreading through the cul-de-sac, but not me. I doubled down that weekend. One added a second flagpole. Raised a Paulumia flag right next to Old Glory. I installed a weatherproof speaker and set it to play the Star-Spangled Banner softly at 6 a.m. right after Liberty's crowing. Not loud, just enough to be heard from the porch. I wasn't doing it to provoke. I was doing it to make a point. If Liberty was too patriotic, then we had officially lost our minds. The neighborhood was split. Some folks started waving when they passed me. One even shouted, "Don't let them break you, rooster guy." Others looked like they wanted to report me for breathing too loud. The funny thing was, Liberty had no clue he was at the center of it all. He just kept crowing, proud and full of energy, like he was auditioning for the bald eagle. Roll on a national seal. That's when the idea for the parade hit me. If they wanted to limit overt patriotism, I'd give them the most overt, unapologetic, freedom-filled event the HOA had ever seen. And Liberty would lead the charge, because if standing proud on your own land, raising your flag, and letting your rooster crow was suddenly too much, then maybe it wasn't me who needed to change. It was time the HOA remembered what kind of country we actually lived in. The moment I decided to throw the parade, I knew I couldn't half do it. Not with how deep into the petty wars we already were. If Liberty was going to be the face of so-called excessive patriotism, then by God, he'd wear that title proudly. Red, white, and blue streamers, band music, even a tiny harness with an American flag cape. The plan started small. Invite a few neighbors who were fed up with the HOA overreach. Get a little community pride going. Make some noise literally and figuratively. I thought maybe 10 or 12 people would join in. What I didn't expect was how quickly it spread. Word got out. I didn't even have to make flyers. People started texting each other, asking, "Is it true you're doing a 4th of July parade?" With a rooster. One neighbor offered to bring his vintage Jeep decked out in flags. Another said she had a whole tub of decorations from past school events. Then came the dad who played trombone in a local jazz band. He said he'd bring the whole brass section by the end of the week. It was no longer a little protest. TYE was a movement. I didn't apply for HOA approval. I knew they'd deny it out of spite, or bury it in forms. The sidewalk and the lawns belonged to homeowners. As long as we weren't blocking traffic, we had every right to celebrate Independence Day. That's what the country was built on. Right? Freedom of speech, freedom of expression, even freedom for a rooster to greet the sun. When the morning of July 4th rolled around, I woke up before Liberty for once. I stepped outside with my coffee and just listened, still dark, A little breeze, not a single soul awake yet. Then Liberty gave his signature crow. Long and bold and unapologetic. That was the signal. By 7 a.m., people were already lining up along the sidewalk. Red, white, tan, blue lawn chairs popped up like mushrooms after rain. Kids with tiny flags in hand. Parents wearing Uncle Sam hats or shirts with bald eagles. It was beautiful. I had turned my old riding mower into a makeshift float, covered it in bunting and streamers, and strapped a speaker to the front. I climbed aboard, cranked up God Bless America on the playlist, and took my spot at the head of the parade, Liberty. He sat right on the front in his harness like the proud little general he was. Behind us came the jazz band, blaring out Stars and Stripes Forever. Then the Jeep guys, then the families walking their dogs in patriotic outfits. Someone had even brought a small cannon replica that puffed out red smoke with every boom. And it wasn't just people from our block. Folks from surrounding streets came to watch. Some held signs. Let the rooster crow. My patriotism offends who? Neighborhoods shouldn't be silent. And yet, in the middle of the crowd, arms crossed, face like she bit into a lemon, stood Carol, watching from the edge of her perfect driveway. She was on her phone, of course, taking video like she was gathering evidence for the United Nations. I caught her eye and smiled. Then Liberty let out the loudest crow of his life. As if on cue, the crowd erupted in laughter and applause. At that moment, I wasn't mad anymore. I wasn't trying to one-up the HOA or make a statement just to prove I was right. I was just proud that people still stood up when things got ridiculous. That even in a quiet neighborhood filled with trimmed hedges and uniform paint colors, you could still make a little noise if the cause was right. Of course, the HOA didn't take it well. 2 days later, I got a formal complaint accusing me of unauthorized public assembly, potential property damage there was none, and creating a divisive atmosphere. They tacked on a fine $250. I paid it in quarters, delivered in a coffee can to the HOA drop box. Liberty rode with me in the passenger seat. But the best part? At the next HOA board meeting, they had a record turnout. Dozens of residents showed up, people who'd never cared before, and they weren't on Carol's side. They voiced concerns about censorship, overreach, and the board's petty enforcement priorities. Someone even stood up and said, "If we're fining people for flags and roosters, what's next?" Humming the national anthem too loud. By the end of the night, the board had to walk back several parts of their proposed community identity preservation policy. The clause about animal noises was removed. The decoration limits were softened. And while they kept vague wording about maintaining peace, everyone knew the real fight had been won. They never mentioned Liberty by name again. Now, weeks later, Liberty still crows like he owns the sunrise. I still fly my flags. And Carol? She trimmed her front hedge into the shape of a dove. I think it's supposed to be passive-aggressive, but honestly, it's kinda nice. All I know is, this little rooster did more than just crow, he reminded an entire neighborhood what standing your ground looks like. And if you ask me, that's the most patriotic thing anyone could do.